Welcome to Mattmakestuff. Today we are making this desktop paper organizer. Let's get started.
All right, so these parts were cut from SendCutSend. This is my second time using them, and so far it's been a good experience. So you'll see me starting out with, I am marking the center points, and then from there, I will use the combo square to give me exactly 12 inches, which is what the width of my shelf is, or the shelf is. And so it just kind of worked out perfectly this way that the length of the combo square is 12 inches. So I knew that I would have, the perfect distance. And then I'm coming back with a smaller combo square, and I'm marking the top and bottom where my break is going to be. And so you'll see here in a second, I'm actually starting with bending the feet. So this is just to protect the body from scratching against the table surface. Just kind of going back and forth. Make sure it's perfectly lined up. And then we're going to bend it to 90 degrees. And once I get to this next bend, I'll explain a little bit of why I'm using an extra fine tip Sharpie and why I'm only marking on the very edges. So that's really the only thing that I'm looking at is the left edge and the right edge. And so that's where I want my mark to be. That's going to give me the most accuracy. And then the extra fine tip Sharpie is to give me the smallest line possible so that I'm also increasing that accuracy. For this one, it being precise was really important because even if it was a 30-second off, then that's going to give me a tiny gap. So when I go to weld it, I'm not going to have a good fit up, and it's going to make welding that much more of a pain. So now this is my second bend. It kind of got stuck in here, and it took me a couple tries. One, to get that second bend in there. And then here you'll see me, I'm actually taking all the dies out to even get the part out. Now, next up is sanding. I am not going to make you watch me sand every single part, but I did sand every single part. This was 120 grit sandpaper. This is just all I had. If I had like an 80 grit or a 60 grit, I would have started there and then finished on a 120. So I did end up spending more time sanding just because all I had on me was 120. So I'm basically just I'm trying to keep a consistent pattern. So I'm going left, right, up, down, up, down. I'm kind of just barely hitting those front edges just to try to get any sharp edges off to make it a little smoother. I hit these two edges with the file just again to get that hard edge off. On my Adobe Illustrator file, I could have had a slight radius, but I kind of just forgot to. And this is my first part having laser cut. The first one I did I did it all by hand. All right, so now we're laying out the actual shelves. And I should have been laying this out on the very edge. I actually had to go back and basically copy this part to the very edge of the material so that when I put the shelf in, I was marking it up with a Sharpie point. So now I'm just transferring that to my back edge. So now then I'll have a front line to go off of for the front of my shelf. And then because the shelf is at a pitch, I have one at the very back too, so I can get it, perfectly lined up. And then I'm also adding, these marks I'm adding right here are for my actual weld, so that when I add my weld, I'm getting a consistent line all the way down. I don't have these kind of like zigzag pattern of the layout, or the weld. Here's just a quick shot of my layout. So now we can start sliding them in. So now you can see if I was off on my brakes, it would be very obvious right now. But it actually worked out pretty well. I was able to get a pretty tight fit up. Here I'm kind of showing you that ever so slightly. So now I'm doing a technique called flash tacking, and I will leave a link to Jody Collier's channel, Welding Tips and Tricks. He has a really good video on this, and I basically just copied his video. So in this method, if you have a really tight fit up, you can basically just flash tack it and your part will hold. And so you're not having to add any filler wire. It's really, really quick method. The tricky part that I ran into on this one was if you put too much heat into it, you will very, very quickly burn through that, you know, the side of that wall, which did happen to me a couple times, and I had to, you'll see later, I had to kind of go back and fix that. So now it's pretty repetitive. Just making sure we're lined up right, that we're getting a tight fit up, pushing things together, just to make my welding that much easier and quicker. And I'm using that. This is a strong hand magnet, just to kind of keep it in place. Those can be very, very handy to have. And here's a little close-up of that flash tack. You'll see my technique was actually kind of bad on this one. My torch was a little all over the place. It should have been very, very stable and not moving at all. So afterwards, I did go back and re-sand everything on the outside because I was wanting to get it to where you couldn't even see those weld marks. So I'm going to sand over that body again. And then here's me going back and fixing where I burned through a little bit too much. So I just use a little bit of filler wire to fill in that spot. And so here I'm going with, I think it was an 80 grit sandpaper, followed up by what I'm using right now, which is a Scotch-Brite pad on a 2-inch roll lock on the Milwaukee cordless. And then hitting it back with that same exact sandpaper. Again, if I would have had like a 60 or 80 grit sandpaper, it would have been a lot quicker. But just because I only had the 120 grit, I ended up having to spend some extra time on the sanding portion of it. So the goal here is just to never know that that even happened. Except you'll know because you're watching this video and you know that I burned through it. So here I'm just using a denatured alcohol. And I have this little bottle. It's super, super handy to have. So you're not having to constantly, every time you're cleaning something, go to like the can, open it, and spill it everywhere. So having a little bottle like this is super handy, especially if you're going on job sites. So I've used acetone more than denatured alcohol, but this just happened to be what I had on hand. But acetone works really, really well as well. So this is a Sculpt Nouveau wax. I've actually only waxed things like a few times. So part of the reason I'm using it is just to work with it more. But it's also, you know, super easy. I don't have to, you know, take something to go get powder coated. I don't have to worry about paint dripping. It just leaves a nice finish. And since this isn't going to be outside or anything, I don't have to worry about it rusting out. So using the wax kind of works well for this process. Now I'm just wiping it on, letting it dry a little bit, then wiping it back off. And the final touch to this is the little felt pads, just to protect the table surface that much more, so there's no scratching happening. And this now is the end of the process. We're gonna flip it over, and it is done.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that video. I got a bunch more lined up. I'm also working on a how to design and fabricate a chair course that will be online, as well as a book version. You can follow me on Instagram at Mattmakestuff, and stay tuned. Have a great day. Bye-bye.